Hi, Dr. Peta Stapleton here, clinical and health registered psychologist here in Australia. As an associate professor in the School of Psychology at one of the universities here in Queensland, I'm quite known and investigate EFT or emotional freedom techniques, often called tapping or psychological acupuncture. We stimulate pressure points on the body by a tapping technique whilst we focus our mind on obviously the problem at hand. So I've long investigated, at least the last 12 to 14 years, the impact of EFT for things like chronic pain, depression, and particularly food cravings and weight loss. But in this research spotlight series, what I want to share with you is where the evidence is at and what it is that is showing up in the clinical trials. So there's well and truly over 120, probably even more now, publications that have been conducted on EFT or tapping. And so certainly in this research spotlight series, what we're trying to do is just educate you according to certain topics and where it might be presently. So check back in because we'll update these as we go through. But today what I want to talk about is the physiological outcomes that we're seeing as a result of a tapping or an EFT intervention. So lots of these studies have been done across a wide range of different topic areas. I've included references below if you do want to go and read about any one of them in particular. But maybe if I can just talk a little bit around the edges of what we're noticing physiologically when we do this stress reduction tool of tapping. So there has been some exciting research that has been done, and if I start just with some areas such as the area of claustrophobia. So you might know that as being obviously frightened or having some of those panic symptoms if you're in a small enclosed space and there's some sort of fear of not being able to escape. So quite a debilitating condition if people do have it, but we've investigated the impact of EFT for those types of conditions, but at a physiological level. So things like heart rate variability have been looked at, EEG scans, EMG, so muscle contractions, things like that, as well as respiratory rate. And all of those conditions, the body's responses, all significantly get impacted after EFT sessions. In my particular area of food cravings, we have recently looked at brain scans of participants, overweight adults, who are actually looking at images of food while they're in an fMRI, functional MRI machine. And then after their EFT intervention, which was for 4 weeks, we brain scanned them again. So again, looking at the differences in the brain that actually occur. And we did find that just after 4 weeks or 8 hours, 2 hours a week of EFT tapping for food cravings in overweight and obese adults, that there was a significant reduction in those areas activated in the brain that are associated with reward and deprivation, and certainly the areas of pleasure around food. So there is another research spotlight series that's on my one single area of food cravings and weight. So you may want to watch that because I do talk about that brain scan study in a little bit more depth. Now there has been a second brain scan study, again fMRI, that has been conducted in America. So Dr. Amy Gasser has been investigating the impact of EFT or tapping on anxiety for school students, teenagers, but at a brain scan level. So again, they were able to have a look at what happens, and we're waiting for that publication to actually come out presently. So watch this space for that one. Of course, cortisol, the stress hormone, has been measured many times across lots of different studies. And listen to the talk that we do in the Research Spotlight series on stress and anxiety, because we talk about that a little bit more. But Dr. Dawson Church has shown that just 1 hour of EFT results in a 24% reduction of cortisol, the stress hormone, that is easily accessed through saliva in the mouth. So that was in comparison to just resting or even learning about stress, so psychoeducation. Both of those conditions after 1 hour had a 14% cortisol reduction, that stress hormone, but the EFT achieved a 24% reduction. So we certainly know at a physiological level things change in the body. So certainly other types of studies that have been done. If I talk about one where 31 people actually attended a 5-day workshop and they were learning about EFT. So they received 16 modules, teaching modules on EFT, and then 12 hours worth of practice in that self-applied EFT within that 5-day period. And things like heart rate variability, blood pressure, pulse rate, certainly cortisol levels again through saliva, circulatory system expression, that kind of thing, immune system response. All of those were measured throughout this workshop. And they found, the researchers found, that after that 5 days, of course, all of those had significant improvements or reductions, depending on what it was that they were looking for. So certainly all of that is very useful for us to know. There has actually been a gene study. So there is a research spotlight that talks about EFT for post-traumatic stress disorder. And in that I do talk about one DNA study that has been done for war veterans who went through a 10-hour EFT. And they found that after 10 hours of EFT or tapping intervention, that 6 of the genes that were associated with the post-traumatic stress response were downregulated. They weren't expressing themselves anymore, and those gains were maintained over time. But another study that was done as well had a look at things like the immune system response, those sorts of things, and found that after 1 hour of EFT, and they did compare to a 1 hour placebo, so they actually had 2 interventions there, that just 1 hour of EFT resulted in differential expression. So either a gene was upregulated or downregulated, meaning it was expressing itself or it was no longer expressing itself, but for 72 genes. So 72 genes were actually impacted upon just by 1 hour of EFT. So these were things that were attached to like the immune system response, so immunity and protection from those sorts of infections and things like that, but also things like suppression of cancer tumour genes that perhaps were responsible for that kind of thing. So again, the papers are listed here in this particular notes down the bottom. So if you want to read a little bit more about the physiological outcomes, you can. And there will be a paper that will appear either late 2018 this year, early 2019, where a meta-analysis has actually been done now on the physiological outcomes from EFT, and certainly the impact that it's having at a much wider area, and that we're looking at data from numerous studies. So that one has actually been finished and is now under review for publication. So I hope this just sort of rounds out, and certainly have a look at some of those other papers that are listed there. Just that EFT or tapping as a stress reduction tool is not necessarily just about making you feel better, or perhaps a distraction technique, or even a placebo, that kind of thing. That there are physiological changes that do happen in the brain and in the body, and that we know long-term follow-ups are also showing that these effects are maintaining over time. So I hope that you've enjoyed just a little bit of a snippet into what might be happening in the brain and the body after tapping. Have a look at some of the other research spotlight series. They might be of interest, including the meta-analysis that have been done. And I hope to see you in another research spotlight soon.